Now we are going to discuss about chapter 9, that is to load data into dimension customer table, where we will use the concept of STD type 1, and also we will discuss about upgrade strategy transformation. Before we go, review of chapters 8. In chapter 8 we have discussed about extracting the data from multiple files. If the files is of the same format, then you can extract it by creating only one mapping in a session. For if you have multiple files of the same format, using single session you can extract and load the data into the target tables. If not, you have to create 3 separate mappings in 3 separate sessions, rather than create one mapping, one session, and extract data from multiple files, provided the structure of the files is the same format. For that, to extract data from multiple files, we have to create a file list, a file with the names of those files from which you want to extract the data. That is called a file list, in which we will specify the name of the files. And in the session properties, we give the path of the file. We will give the path for the file of the file list. File list is the one which contains the file names. Then we change from directive to indirect source type. So at runtime, Informatica goes to the file list, checks the first file name, goes to that path, extracts the data. How many files are there? That many files. Data is extracted one after the another by the Informatica. Then the loading process takes place. That's what we discussed in chapter 8 about source of multiple files. Then we discussed about extracting the data from staging, STG underscore product table to dimension underscore product table. It is a STG database. From STG database to TGT database we are going to load. So we defined the structures. For TGT database, we didn't have a ODBC, so we created an ODBC connection to import the structure of from the TGT database, the table dimension underscore product. So while loading the data into the dimension underscore product table, the requirement is we need to load a sequentially generated number into a product key, which is nothing but a surrogate key. So while inserting the data into the target table, a sequence number should be generated for each and every record and inserted along with the record in the target table. For that, business object for that, Informatica provides you with a transformation called a sequence generator transformation. The purpose of sequence generator is to generate sequence numbers. It has next val and third val, 2 columns in it. We will use the next val to connect to the product key. We initialize it in the properties of sequence generator at what number you want to start, and also the increment value. Then when you execute the session, the current val is the current value which will be moved into the next val, and when the process is going on based on your incremental, by which value you want to increase, the next value will get incremented, and when the session is completed, whatever the last value loaded plus the increment value will be stored in for the current value, and it is physically stored in the repository of Informatica, so that when you execute next time the session, it should start from that number. So this is the process of sequence generator transformation. Then we discussed about loading data into dimension dealership table from STG, and in the STG table under the country column there is a null value. As per the business requirement, you have to replace null with USA. So we used an expression transformation in which there is a functionality called a default value. It replaces the null value in that column when you're specifying the default value of the expression. So we specified USA for country column, country port. So at runtime, whenever there is a null value in that country port, it will replace with USA. Then we use the sequence generator to generate the sequence numbers to load the data into dimension dealership table. Then we discussed about loading the data into by using multiple mappings in a single mapping, which is called as pipeline loading. We have taken dimension promotions and dimension payments loading into created two mappings in a single mapping, which is called pipeline loading. Then we discussed about the target load plan, which one should load first. You can set it up. This is what we have discussed in the chapter 8. Now, going further down, we are going to discuss about in the chapter 9, loading data into dimension customer table. We will introduce the concept of SCD type 1 in this, then update strategy transformation. So, the mapping will load data from STG customer table and load data into dimension customer table. It is SCD type 1. The requirement is in the source data you will have multiple occurrences of the same customer. So you need to load data into dimension customer table, implement the logic of SCD type 1. What is SCD type 1? Slowly changing dimension type 1. Let us look at it from a layman terms. You have extracted the data from source customer table and loaded the data into STG customers table from the previous mapping. Now, from STG customer table, we need to load data into dimension customer table. So, if you recall in data warehouse concept, we discussed about SCD type 1. So, the requirement is from STG customer. Now, we are going to load data into dimension customer table. We will check, is the 101 coming from my STG customer table? Does it exist in my target table? So STG type 1 from STG customers, when you extract the data 101, does it exist or not in my DIM customer table? If it does not exist, you insert the data. Then the second record coming from STG customer table, does it exist or not? My customer table, it does not exist, so I insert it. Then next day, let's say this is the source customer table data updated in the data tables. Two customers already existing are updated, and 104 customer was inserted in my source customer table. I extracted and loaded into stage customer table. Before I load it, I delete the data in customer. I discussed in data warehouse concepts. So you deleted and loaded it. Let's assume you then loaded the data into a customer mapping. Now we are going to create mapping to extract data from a customer table and load the data into dimension customer table. 101 record exists. It is coming from my stage customer table. Then if it exists, then update the record in the dimension customer table for that customer. So you go and update it. Then the second record comes in. Checks 104 exists or not. If it does not exist, then you insert the record into the dimension table. Then the next record, third record 102 comes in from the stage customer table. Does it exist or not? It exists, the dimension customer table. So we will insert then we will update the records with those values in my dimension table. So this is the logic of SCD type 1. So if you look at fundamentally, simple algorithm is if the record, that is our employee ID coming from my staging table, exists in the dimension, does not exist, let's take it, does not exist in my dimension table, then what we do? We insert, else we update. It is a simple logic. So what we have done, if the record does not exist, we go and update it. If the record exists, we went and updated it. If the record does not exist, we inserted it. If you look at it, this is the flow again. 101, we'll check, does the record exist in my dimension customer table? It exists, then update the record in the dimension table for that 101 with the values of the stage data. The values of the stage data, you go and update it. Then you'll check for the next record 104 exists or not. If it exists, then if it does not exist, you go and insert it. Then check third record 102 exists, yes. Then update the record in my dimension table. So if the record exists, does not exist, insert it, update it. So what's our fundamental rules? Now as per the mapping logic, what we should find out, after you define the source and target, first we need to find out if the employee ID of the staging data exists in the dimension table for that particular employee ID. First we need to find exists or not. If it does not exist, then you have to insert it. If it exists, then we have to update dimension table. We have to insert the data of what? Data of staging into dimension table. If that employee ID exists, then you update data of staging to dimension table based on the employee ID, customer ID in our case. So this is what is the logic. Now let us talk about informatica. This is your source, that is your staging table. What is our first requirement? We need to check the customer ID which is coming from my staging table. The customer ID which is coming from my staging table, does it exist or not? To find if a record exists or not, get a related value, or to find a record exists or not, Informatica provides you with a transformation called lookup transformation. So you do a lookup on the dimension customer table based on the customer ID which is coming from my staging is equal to, you did a lookup. On which table you did a lookup, that lookup dot customer ID. That is, you are checking this customer ID coming from my source staging table. Checks if the customer ID exists or not. So what happens? Informatica, the customer ID exists, then it will return a value. That is, if this condition is satisfied, functionality of a lookup is, if the condition is satisfied, it will return the value. If the condition fails, it will return a null value. The lookup. So if it fails, that is, if it returns a null value, then we insert the data. If it returns a value, that is, this condition is satisfied, the customer ID exists in the target table, then we need to update it. So you are doing two things. Data is coming. One is you are inserting or updating. Till now, whatever mappings you have done, you have only inserted the data into the target table. But here, now the situation comes where you have to insert the data based, either you have to insert or update based on the data. The same mapping, based on some condition, you have to insert or update the data the target table. So what we do? We will split this data into two streams. For that we will use a router transformation. One is if it is null, and the other is not null. The return value which is coming from my lookup, is it have a null value or not? If it has a null value, then what we do? We have to insert the data into the target table. Same target, dimension underscore employee table only. We have to insert it, but how will you? Based on some condition, you have to update the record. Because if it is not null, when will it not be null? When this condition is satisfied. When this condition gets satisfied, then the corresponding customer ID exists in my target table. That is in my dimension employee table. So I need to update the record in my dimension table. This is called two target tables, multiple instances, same target table. But how to update it, how to insert it? If I link it, it will be inserted, but how to update it? So Informatica provides you with a transformation called update strategy, which I am going to discuss. The purpose of this update strategy transformation, they call it as this. I will write the syntax for insert the data and update strategy for updating the data. So regarding update strategy, we will discuss in detail. So first fundamental rule, if the record exists or not, first we have to find out. So we use the lookup transformation, then the router which splits the data into multiple streams, then we will use the update strategy transformation. So if the record exists, update it. If the record does not exist, that is insert it. So we will use a lookup transformation to find the record exists or not. Lookup transformation is to get related values or verify if a record exists or if data has changed in the table on which you did the lookup. Based on your condition, you do a lookup on that target table, get a related value. For that purpose, we will transformation and will specify the condition. This customer ID coming from my staging source equal to the customer ID. The condition does not satisfy, then it returns a null value. If it returns a null value, we know that it is the record. If it returns a value, then the record exists. Corresponding data has to be updated in my target table. So same target table, multiple instances. Consider it as multiple targets. So we will use the router transformation, split the data, then to update the records or insert the records with update strategy. Come to the lookup. How will it get the data from the lookup table? On dimension customer, it will write a select statement like your source qualifier. It will write a select statement to get the data from the table on which you are doing the lookup. You can modify that select statement. Then it will database. Then it will put the data in the cache. We have discussed the seventh mapping, salary file, condition specified. We said that data comes into the cache, the data into the cache, and record by record it will scan the cache. So So to find the record exists or not, we'll use the lookup, split the data into multiple streams with the router transformation. To insert or update the records, we will use the update strategy transformation. Purpose of update strategy transformation is to update records. That is to insert or update or delete or reject the records into the target table. Based on the condition you specify, it will insert the records into the target, or it will update the records in the target, or it will reject the records in the target or delete the records in the target. Then use if functions, code functions handle. Insert, update, delete, reject means not load the data into the target. So this is the functionality of update strategy transformation. The properties, how will you write it? _insert. You don't write insert, or you say 0, fire insert statement onto the target. You say _update. Or a numeric value 1, go and update the record in the target. _delete, it will delete the records. _reject means not roll the data into the target. So you want called based on the data you are doing XML activity, that it insert, delete, update, also reject the records. For that purpose you will use update strategy transformation. So let us look at the data now. I create a source qualifier, best practice, expression transformation. I do a lookup on my dimension customer table, and my condition is customer ID, which is coming from my staging, that is my source for this mapping. Customer ID of the equal to customer ID of the lookup. Condition, customer ID which is coming from the lookup, and customer ID input. Then we will split the data, router transformation. I will take the customer ID lookup, like the salary you have taken in the 7th mapping. I am taking only the customer ID. This mapping I only find if the record exists or not. So this customer ID which is coming from my lookup, if it returns a null value means condition failed. If it returns a value means condition exists, that is customer ID exists. That understanding, we created a router. The router we created one group called for is null customer ID lookup. That is the customer ID. If it is null, then the corresponding records has to be inserted. So please look at our discussion also. If the customer ID of the staging exists in the dimension customer table or not, we check it. Does not exist, insert it. If it exists, you update it. So this is the identifier of the customer ID which is coming from my lookup. I renamed it here because two same names will get confused. So customer ID coming from my lookup, if it contains null value means the corresponding record customer ID does not exist. So it will, you need to go and insert it. Then we use update strategy transformation. In that you will specify the _insert. Then it will fire insert statement into the target table. So in the update strategy transformation, put the _insert and _update. So the record will be updated or inserted into my target table. As soon as we execute this mapping, set the informatica server goes to the source, gets the data. If you have a lookup on a table, it will go to that table on which you are doing a lookup and gets the data from the table on which you the lookup. Now, for example, now first time there is no data in my dimension customer table, so there is no data in the cache. Now record by record process. First record comes in 101, goes to informatica's lookup cache. Based on the condition, it will scan the cache. So 101 does not exist. So what it will return? It will return in null value. Please observe here, it will return in null value. Return in null value for this corresponding 101 record. Should be your understanding. This is the corresponding record. This return in null value goes to the router transformation. Then this router transformation will check for the condition customer ID of this. That's why I renamed it as LK. So this is null. So it has to be inserted. So we will use dd underscore insert. So it say dd underscore insert, it will go and insert the data into the target table. Then the second record comes in, scans the cache. Does the record exist or not? Does not exist, so it will return a null value for this corresponding 102. Will capture in the lookup router transformation. Then check for the condition. If null, yes, so the corresponding record has to be inserted to the target table. Inserted into the target table. Now let us take the next scenario. This is the data in the dimension customer table. So you do a lookup, this is your mapping. As soon as you execute this from the source, this is the data coming from your source. So 101, 103, 102 coming in. This lookup will go to the dimension table customer, gets the data into the cache. So when you execute it, goes to that table on which you are doing the lookup, gets the data and puts it in the cache. And from the source, it will get the data from the source. How does it get the data from this table? It is a table, so it will write a select statement internally by default. Like your source qualifier, it will write a select statement. So it gets the data into the cache. Now, record by record informatica process it. So 101 comes in, scans the cache. Based on your conditions, 101 exists, so it will return a value for 101. What is the value in this customer ID? 101. And this is the actual data. This is the data coming from your lookup. Then it will check, does this customer ID lookup contains null value? No, it contains a value. It contains a value means this record of customer ID exists in my target table. That is my understanding. So I'll go and update the record. How does Informatica will update the record? It will fire an update statement. Update statement, set name is equal to Steve, address is equal to San Jose, version is equal to 2.0, and it should be on some column you are going to update it. So where customer ID is equal to 101. How will you write where condition? Based on the primary key of your target table, it will write the where condition by itself. So it will write an update statement along with the where condition. Where condition is based on your primary key of your target table. So it gets updated. Then 103 comes in, scans the cache, record does not exist, so it will return a null value, goes to your router transformation, checks for null value, then Informatica's update strategy will send the insert statement based on the columns going into the target table, and it inserts the data. Then 102 comes in, scans the cache. 102 comes in now, scans the cache. Yes, condition satisfied, 102 exists. So customer ID of the lookup will return 102 value. Now in the router transformation, 102 exists. So it will go to the update strategy which has dd update. It will fire update statement based on the customer ID for all the other values. Goes and updates this record. So if the record exists, you update it. If the record does not exist, you insert it. The logic Informatica build a mapping of type 1. Now I am going to create the mapping. Focused. I am going to create the mapping now. First step, when you create the mapping, go to the source, import from database. PG customer is my source. import from database, in customer, target, create the mapping. Mapping, create, underscore, and underscore. Source, state customer, target dimension customer, transformation, create expression. For best practice, we use expression transformation after the customer, after the source qualifier. This is best practice. So I put all my data into this. Now I need to find the record exists or not in my target table. Customer ID exists or not in my target table. So I use a transformation called lookup transformation. Now I do a lookup on my target in customer table. Like you have defined the structure of your of the lookup flat file. Will import from the relational table. I will discuss about source and target later. This I am talking about, I will discuss later. From relational, the ODBC connection to connect to that database. Table we want dim customers table. So you are doing a lookup dim customers table. Find if the record exists or not. Take the customer ID. That is, rename this. Condition. Customer ID of the lookup is the customer ID of the coming from the source, that is your X. Then we want to split the data from the condition, the router transformation. In the data, the router's transformation. What is our condition? We have to take the customer ID from my lookup and the corresponding records from my expression transformation. So I take the customer ID. Be careful and understand it. The customer ID coming from my lookup, I rename it for my better understanding. That I can understand that it is coming from my lookup table. I don't need the dealership ID from the expression transformation because in the target table it does not need the dealership ID. So customer ID to version here. Source customer ID to version coming from here. Expression transformation. Lookup from lookup it is coming from there. So I renamed it. Now group conditions. What is our condition? It does not exist. Set if it exists. State how you identify the customer ID which is coming from the lookup. It is null. Condition failed. Then we need to insert it. So I'll create a group for set record. In name, the router, give a name to that group condition. And I say condition. What is my condition? Is null. Write it down in your somewhere in your sheet. Is null. Customer ID lookup. Be careful. It is not this customer ID. This customer ID will have a value every time. This customer ID lookup is it null. This is null means that this customer ID which is coming in does not exist in my target table based on the lookup transformation. That is my understanding. So one condition. Then I'll do. The condition is true. then it will stream this data. So what I should do, insert the data into my target table. So I will use a transformation called update strategy transformation. Syntax for update, please write it down. Is update using for insert, so I name it as PD insert. Their columns are required from here, customer ID to the version. Drag and drop from customer ID to version, drag and drop, double click. Proper case, like filter transformation, you have properties, update strategy transformation. Here you will write PD underscore insert. That is the syntax for insert, or you can put 0 there. So automatically Informatica, when it loads the data into this target table, will fire the insert statement, what we wanted. Then the second condition is for update old record. So what will be the condition here? We'll write not is null customer ID lookup. Not is null customer ID lookup means that customer ID exists in my target table, so I need to update the record in my target table. So this is not is null customer ID lookup. Now I need to load data into the target and write the update strategy transformation for this. So update, my update, PD. Be careful which group you are taking it. You have to be very careful which you are taking it. So this is the group I am taking it into mine. So properties, the update strategy, what I need to update the record in my target table. So I write PD underscore update. Same target, multiple instances. Back to the paintbrush. The logic also we discussed, same target. Then you insert or update called multiple instances. You are updating or inserting in dimension. So look like multiple targets, but this same target, multiple instances. So I drag my target again for my update purpose. So this is called same target table. If you go inside, it is same customers, also same customer. So now set DD update. So how it works. Source qualifier and export transformation. Best practice, they look up. Now at runtime, what does this lookup will do? It will get the data from that table on which you did the lookup, that is customer table. But how will you get the data from a table? You have to write a select statement. So by default, you will write the default select statement. Get the data from the table on which you are doing lookup. On which table you are doing lookup, it is the table. Write a select statement to get the data into the lookup cache on time. It is a flat file. It is a flat file also get the data internal mechanism, but if it is a table, it write a default select. You can modify the select statement called a override. Right? So this is the data to get the data from the table on which you are doing lookup. Now here I will discuss with one performance. Actually, what columns we require? Require only the customer ID exists or not based on this condition. Customer ID of the lookup, the customer ID which is computed, does it exist or not, only the columns required. But if you keep all the columns of the table on which the lookup, it will fire a select statement. Columns, and it will get all the data into the cache. All the data into the lookup cache with name, address, phone number and all that stuff. But we don't require all that columns. Whatever is required for our condition out of the transformation, that columns will pick up. So it will reduce the burden on the cache, because we need only the customer ID coming from your source and customer ID from your lookup. Other columns you don't require, so remove those columns. Did I remove it? Double click. Your mouse select. Next. Then get the query what it will fire. Fires only the customer ID from dimension customer. Because we need that data only dimension customer table. So it will fire that query and gets you the data into your cache of your lookup, your cache directory, cache size, and save your work. So recap of it: when you extract data from store is dimension customer type 1, the record exists. The corresponding customer ID exists in my target table. I have to update the record in my target. The record does not exist in my target table, then you have to insert the corresponding record into type 1. So first step, we need to find if the record exists or not, customer ID exists or not. Check that record exists or not, we use the lookup transformation, find if the record exists or not. And if the condition is satisfied, the record exists. The condition is not satisfied, the record does not exist. I'm talking the customer ID which is coming from. So if it exists, it will return a value. If it does not exist, return a null value. So in the router transformation, take the customer ID of the lookup, rename it as AP from our better understanding, and these are the columns. Then we'll create a group condition, null customer ID lookup. If it is null or not. If it is null, we need to insert it. If not null, we have to update it. So I have written two conditions. Take the data. The record does not exist. Be a null, so it goes to the update strategy transformation. Update strategy can insert or update or delete or reject the data in the target. We need in this only to insert it. Tag for insert and the insert. So it will fire an insert statement into the target table. The record exists. It will return a value for customer ID lookup. So we need to update this corresponding record into target. I cannot input two things into one target. So I use another target table with the same target table multiple. So in the update strategy transformation, write dd_update, then it goes and updates the record in the target. So this is how to build the mapping informatica for SQL type 1. Now we need to execute this mapping. So what we will go to the property. For that, please write down in your sheet of paper 0.8.1, that is the source table from STG for the target table, and in the transformation is the ODBC connection and the username password to connect that table. Please go ahead and write this. Write it down in one for the source, target, the table structure. It's a very simple logic, but you should understand how the transformation works in this is type 1. Now we are going to create a session for this task developer. Class create session underscore m underscore underscore dim underscore. Double click, string, source. Now to go to the STG, two target tables. You have to do target connections. Same target table, multiple instances. So you have to give two target connections. And one more important thing, don't forget it. You are doing a lookup on a target on a table, so you have to specify the connection. If it is a file, you have to the path. If it is a table, you have to give the connection, and our connection is trainer T. So you specify the connection for the lookup transformation. Here it will show you all the transformations that are there in your informatica mapping, bonding mapping. So for lookup, you give the connection, say OK. So go ahead and write this 13.9 for the lookup connection, source connection, target connection, lookup connection. Set up these things, session name, source connection, target connection. Write it down. Think you remember this, write it down. Very useful when you go tomorrow after the training program to understand how we have done these mappings and all that stuff. We'll write it down this. Now I'll create the workflow. So create WF S underscore M underscore 11 underscore. Tag my session. I'll save my. Now I right click and say start workflow. So it has extracted the data. A unique key constraint violation. Worry about it. I'll explain later why it has happened. It has 160 records, 5,883 records were loaded, 283 rejected. I will explain you later why this 83 rejected. I will justify that later. But for today, chapter 9, complete this mapping data. It should look 5,880 target. So let me check in my database. Word count 5,008. So don't worry about why it has detected those 80 records. Of that, my explanation justify why it has happened.